All right, students, it's my pleasure to introduce to you the hero's journey. What these are is 12 stages that a hero goes through. Joseph Campbell was a man who studied his whole life. He studied mythologies and storytelling throughout history, whether it was on the other side of the world in China or whether it was, 2,000 years ago in Greek mythology, or right here in our modern times. He studied the way that we tell stories and that we look at our heroes, and he realized that there were many similarities. In fact, sometimes they're almost identical. And so this is the hero's journey according to Joseph Campbell. And what they are is they're really 12 stages the hero goes through. And here's a little chart that kind of shows them, and I'm going to be going through them one at a time. And it really is about kind of exploring the ordinary world that we live in and then the special world that the hero has to go into to have his adventure. And we'll talk about those in detail as we move on here. The first stage is where the hero is living in his ordinary world. And so this would be, as you can see on the screen here, this would be Frodo Baggins living in the Shire, just enjoying a simple, happy life. You could also say this is Luke Skywalker on Tatooine, just doing his farm work on that little desert island. And then something happens, okay? They get called to some kind of adventure, and they're triggered to leave home, to go on some kind of adventure. And sometimes they're willing, sometimes they're not. The image here shows Neo being given the choice of the red pill or the blue pill, where he could stay in his ordinary world or he could go on the adventure. And what usually happens is the hero at first is reluctant to go, right? So stage 3 is they want to refuse the call, or they feel like they have too much in their world that they have to take care of, and there's no way that they can leave. We saw this with Luke Skywalker. He wasn't going to leave with Obi-Wan. He had too much to take care of. And but then you remember that his aunt and uncle had been killed and murdered, and that actually drove him to want to take the next step, which was to cross that threshold. But somewhere in there we're going to meet, and I've already spoke a little bit about this, they're going to meet a mentor. And you think about all of your great stories, the ones that I've already shared. We have Neo that was led by Morpheus. That was his mentor. On the picture here you can see Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Frodo, of course, would be Gandalf, the great, the wizard. And so this is true whether it's just in movies or even some of the famous books. There's always someone who comes along, a wise old man or woman, that kind of gives them some knowledge, helps them to improve their ability, believes in them, encourages them, and then because of that, they're willing to cross that threshold into the unknown. And this is where, of course, in Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, he gets on the ship to leave Tatooine. Stage 5 is also sometimes called the point of no return, because once you cross that threshold, you're going to have to go through with the adventure. And you can see here in the image the young girl getting ready to step into the cabinet in Chronicles of Narnia. But this is an important step. This is a step when the hero, has finally taken that step, that they can't return. They've got to go on. They've got to improve. And then this is where a lot of the action takes place. So the stage 6 is where the hero must face tests, he gains allies, and of course he learns about his enemies. And this is where much of the meat of the story happens. This is where Luke Skywalker goes through all of his trainings. He experiences some battles. He learns how to use the lightsaber, all of those things. And he starts to learn that he has big enemies out there that he's someday going to have to face. Okay, right here the last comment is pretty important too, that he will go through a lot of successes and failures, and these failures are kind of like death and rebirth, small deaths and rebirths as they're progressing and learning and growing and getting ready for the big ultimate challenge. And This stage 6 is when they, or stage 7, excuse me, is where they approach the innermost cave. Okay, and so they have done all their training. They've had so many tests. They feel like they're almost ready. They may even have an overconfidence at some point. But then they see the true challenge ahead of them. They're approaching that innermost cave. They're approaching their biggest fear, and they start to maybe, question a little bit. And you can see Frodo and Samwise here are looking at the dangerous territory that they have to enter into. And they realize that this must be overcome, and it's just going to be tough. And then stage 8, of course, is the supreme ordeal. This is where the hero must face the greatest challenge. Luke Skywalker must face the Emperor and Darth Vader. The great knight must defeat the dragon. Harry Potter must face down Voldemort, right? And eventually, hopefully, right, the enemy is defeated. But this isn't the end of the story, and this is important. This was maybe what we call the major climax of the story, but once they get there, stage 9, there's something that they win from that. And often, in a lot of the stories that we love, it's some kind of prize, a sword, or sometimes it's an elixir, which is some kind of medicine that saves their people when they go back. And so it's going to make their life and the lives of those that they've been on this quest for better. But they're not out of the woods yet, okay? They've got to get their way out. And this is the famous, they've got to make their way out of the cave. I always think of Indiana Jones. He gets the thing he's been looking for, but now the cave is crushing in around him, and he's got to get out, right? And so it's not completely out of the woods yet. They've got to make their way back out of the dangerous world, back to their ordinary world. And when they do that, this is the symbolism of the resurrection. The hero has returned to his ordinary world, but he's grown into something more new, more powerful. And it's often looked at as kind of a metamorphosis. The caterpillar becomes the butterfly, the phoenix rising from the ashes, and something new and more powerful. They return to their ordinary world, but they're never really the same. And that brings us to the last stage, which is they've returned with the elixir. They've realized and learned so much that they realize they have a bigger purpose, that they must continue the fight. And the hero shares their gift, their elixir, back to the village, back to the ordinary world. And they might just pass this wisdom on, or there might be a new adventure or challenge on the horizon. And this is where a lot of the trilogies start. And if you look at that, the trilogy will start over, and it will be that same thing again. They'll leave that world and go back and do it all again. And this is a powerful, these 12 stages is powerful storytelling, but it's also powerful as you look at your own life. And I hope you make some of those connections.